Off that.
Okay, let's dive in today with something quite powerful and I think relatable for many. Imagine this. Mrs. T, she's relaxing on her porch,
Okay.
sees her next door neighbor, someone she's known, really known, for 15 years.
Yeah.
Shared tea, complained about the weather, the usual stuff.
Right, a very familiar face.
Exactly. The neighbor waves,
Mm.
Mrs. T smiles, waves back automatically. But then, maybe a minute later, you ask her, hey, who was that? She pauses, gets this little furrow in her brow, and says hesitantly, I think, maybe someone I used to see at church.
Wow. 15 years next door versus maybe someone from church. That's quite the disconnect.
It really is. And that kind of moment, that specific failure to place a deeply familiar face, well, it often gets lumped under, general memory loss.
A catch-all term.
But based on the research we're looking at today, this isn't just general forgetting, is it?
Mm.
It's something much more specific. A shift in what we call social recognition.
That's precisely it. And getting that distinction right is really the heart of what we want to explore in this deep dive. We're looking into the specific, often really profound, and honestly frequently misunderstood change.
Okay.
We want to clarify why that familiar social world can suddenly feel so unpredictable for someone, and crucially, offer some practical, research-backed ways to support them.
So let's lay the groundwork first. What exactly is social recognition?
Well, in essence, it's our brain's ability to identify the familiar faces, voices, even those subtle social cues. It's the unspoken glue of connection, really.
That glue? I like that.
Yeah, it helps us read expressions instantly, know who's who, feel safe, feel grounded in our relationships. When that starts to wobble, the whole relational world can change.
Okay, so let's get into the mechanics then. If Mrs. T still knows her neighbor's routine, remembers their shared history, feels warmth towards her, why does the face, the actual visual, fail? Is the memory gone, or is it like the brain's filing system is just malfunctioning?
It's much more like the filing system, or maybe the retrieval part of it. The sources point clearly to this. As the brain ages, particularly in areas handling complex visual stuff and relational info,
Which areas are we talking about?
specifically the temporal and occipital lobes seem key here. Their ability to process and, importantly, retrieve the correct social information can start to fluctuate. It might fade or become less reliable.
Temporal and occipital lobes. So, translating that.
Right. So the temporal lobe is crucial for storing those long-term visual memories, like faces you know well. The occipital lobe is handling the immediate visual input, what you're seeing right now.
Okay.
When the communication between what I'm seeing now and who I know this is starts to fray, well, the face you're looking at doesn't correctly trigger the right name or context from memory.
So the pattern matching system is struggling. It sees the pattern in the face, but can't reliably link it to the right memory file, the name, the relationship.
Exactly. It's not indifference. It's not that the person doesn't care. It's a genuine processing glitch. The brain tries to find a match, and if the right one isn't easily accessible, it might grab the nearest approximation.
Like someone from church instead of my neighbor of 15 years. Because both fit a broad category of, say, familiar older woman I know socially.
Precisely. And this internal confusion, this pattern matching difficulty, leads to behaviors that loved ones can observe. These are the signals that the person's social map is becoming unreliable.
What should people be watching for?
Well, you might see a noticeable pause, like a hesitation before greeting someone they clearly should know. That's a big one.
Okay, a lag in recognition.
Yeah. Then there's the more obvious confusion, mixing up faces, mixing up names, even in really familiar places like home or a regular club.
Right.
But it gets deeper. This pattern matching struggle can actually extend beyond just identifying people. It can affect how they interpret social cues.
How's-
They might start misinterpreting emotional expressions, reading a neutral face as angry, perhaps, or misunderstanding the tone of voice.
Oh, wow. Okay, and this is where it gets really tricky, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because if someone starts misreading neutral interactions as negative or suspicious.
Exactly. That compounds things massively. The sources mention this can sometimes build into what looks like genuine suspicion towards people they once trusted completely.
That's profound. Because from the outside, that behavior could easily be mistaken for paranoia or just deciding to withdraw socially.
But what you're saying is the behavior isn't necessarily about paranoia itself, but it's communicating something more fundamental. The social world doesn't feel predictable or safe anymore. I can't trust my own interpretation of it. You've got it. If you can't reliably tell who's friendly, who's familiar, who means well, every single social interaction becomes potentially a high-risk situation.
And that brings us to a really critical concept from the behavioral science sources, right? This idea of avoidance reinforcement.
Yeah.
Yes. Think of it simply. If doing something leads to a negative outcome, your brain learns to avoid doing that thing. Touch a hot stove, feel pain, learn to avoid hot stoves. Okay, basic learning.
Apply that here. If trying to recognize someone or saying their name leads to failure, maybe embarrassment, maybe being corrected, that feels bad. It's socially painful.
So the brain learns that trying to engage socially is risky.
Precisely. It learns that staying quiet, or maybe limiting interactions, or in more extreme cases, just staying home, that prevents the uncomfortable outcome. It avoids the potential shame.
So it becomes a self-protection strategy. The brain finds a way to minimize the risk of those painful social errors.
That's exactly what happens. The person starts to withdraw, their social world shrinks. But, and this is the crucial reframe, it's not shrinking because they've lost interest in people. It's shrinking because their brain is subconsciously trying to protect them from the distress of repeated recognition failures. Understanding that changes how we should respond completely.
It really does. It shifts the focus from blaming the person for being unsociable to understanding a cognitive challenge. Okay, so let's dig into the research you mentioned. What exactly is being lost here? Is it the feeling, the emotional connection, or is it more about the visual picture?
This is where it gets really hopeful, actually. The sources point to a key study, one published in 2023 in Aging, Neuropsychology, and Cognition. They really tried to isolate what's going wrong in recognition failure in older adults.
And what did they find?
Well, the fascinating thing was the clarity of the results. They found that the decline in face recognition was specifically linked to changes in visual perceptual processing, how the brain is handling the incoming visual information.
Okay, the visual side.
Yeah.
What about the emotional connection?
Crucially, they found these visual processing declines were not linked to similar drops in emotional awareness or their semantic memory about the person you know, the facts and feelings they associate with them.
Wait, hold on. So you're saying Mrs. T might still feel all the warmth and affection for her neighbor?
Yes.
Remember shared jokes or important events from their 15 years?
Potentially, yes. The semantic and emotional memory can remain largely intact.
But her brain just can't reliably process the visual data of her neighbor's face and link it to the correct file anymore.
That's the core implication, and it's a huge takeaway. The emotional connection, the history, the knowing someone, that often stays. But the visual trigger, the specific face acting as the key to unlock that file, that's the part that's becoming unreliable.
The brain's social map is losing its accuracy for faces.
Well put. It struggles to navigate by faces alone.
So Mrs. T wasn't forgetting the relationship. She was losing the visual anchor that used to reliably retrieve it.
Wow. That distinction is critical.
It really is. Because it tells us that our support strategy shouldn't be about, drilling names and faces like flashcards.
Exactly. That often just increases anxiety and reinforces the avoidance we talked about. Instead, we need to support the person around the failing visual anchor, preserving their dignity.
Okay, so let's get practical. Based on this understanding, what can someone listening do if they're supporting a loved one facing these challenges? The sources offer several really effective strategies. First, and maybe most importantly, normalize it. How do you mean?
Reduce that shame, break the avoidance cycle. Say something simple and compassionate like, oh, it happens sometimes faces can be tricky for all of us to remember, or don't worry about it.
Just take the pressure off immediately. Preserve their dignity.
Use contextual cues. Since the emotional and factual memory is often still there, use that as a bridge. Don't just push someone into a room.
Give them a hint.
Right. Provide a verbal link.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just, here's Anna, try, here's Anna, your lovely neighbor who brings you those amazing flowers every spring.
Oh, connecting the face to a strong memory. The flowers, the kindness, the routine. You're linking the new visual input to an existing, stronger memory pathway. Third, simplify the environment when possible. Makes sense. Fewer inputs, less chance of error.
Large gatherings, noisy restaurants, that's sensory overload. It makes the pattern matching system work way harder. Fewer faces, calmer background means fewer errors, less stress.
Okay, what else?
Offer subtle assistance. This is key. If you see that hesitation starting, that struggle, step in gently before they're forced to guess and risk feeling embarrassed.
So instead of quizzing, do you remember who this is?
Yeah, avoid that. Just quietly supply the name or a connecting detail. Maybe turn to the person arriving and say, hi, Mary, good to see you. Or, oh, look, it's Mary from your book club.
Just model the correct information smoothly. I know some people worry that feels patronizing.
It can feel awkward, but the research suggests gentle modeling is much better than forced recall, which ramps up anxiety and reinforces that avoidance.
Okay. And the last one, reinforce success. When they do get it right, acknowledge it. A simple positive comment. You remembered her name straight away, that was great. Positive feedback to strengthen those retrieval pathways.
Exactly. It encourages future attempts and builds confidence.
The sources also touched on a few nuances, right? Like, what if the recognition flickers? They know someone one day, but not the next.
Yes, that fluctuation is totally normal. Recognition ability can be really sensitive to things like fatigue, stress, even sensory overload on a given day. The system isn't necessarily broken uniformly, it's just become less reliable under pressure.
And what about correcting errors? If they call someone the wrong name, should you jump in?
Generally, the advice is to avoid immediate direct correction. Saying, no, that's not Mary, that's Sarah, can really increase anxiety.
So what's the alternative?
Again, gentle modeling. Later in the conversation, you might casually say something like, oh, I was just talking to Sarah about that last week. Weave the correct name in naturally, rather than making it a direct confrontation of the error.
That makes sense. Less pressure. And for people who like tools, technology can help too.
Absolutely. Things like digital photo frames that display names with pictures, simple memory aid apps, or even just clearly labeled photos placed around the house.
The sources called them environmental taskmasters, which I liked.
Yeah, they provide gentle, consistent cues without the pressure of a direct question. They help reinforce recognition in a low-stress way.
So if we were to boil this all down, what's the main takeaway message? I think the core reframing is this. Connection, that deep human bond, it doesn't just vanish when recognition becomes difficult. The emotional core often remains strong. It just needs different ways to be accessed and expressed.
Exactly, and needs new, predictable, and supportive pathways.
And those pathways are built through these kinds of behavioral strategies. The compassion, the consistency, treating it as a visual processing challenge, not an emotional failing.
Spot on. It's about rebuilding that bridge between the person and their social world.
Okay, so a final thought to leave our listeners with. Well, perhaps it's this. This isn't just about managing decline. There's evidence that recognition can be supported, even perhaps retrained to some degree, not through stressful drills, but through consistent, patient, predictable cues. So there's hope in adaptation.
Absolutely. And if we really take that on board, if we understand it's often the visual map failing, not the heart, well, that changes how we see aging, how we interact, how we support connection. It's about fostering that connection, one behavior, one gentle cue at a time. And that feels pretty profound.